an insightful panel discussion right now for innovation and technology. These are words y'all are hearing a lot these days. As the realm of technology continues to evolve at an unprecedented pace, it's essential to stay at the forefront of innovation to drive personal and your professional growth. We'll have some time for Q&A after the panel, so please jot down any questions that y'all have. So please help me in welcoming our moderator, Dahlia Calgreen. Woo! And our panelist, Shara Hutchinson. Woo! We have Catherine Benedum, Kristen Kyle, and Naveed Iqbal. So enjoy, everyone. Thank you all so much for being here.
Well, that was so fun. I told them as we get on the stage, let's do our best pose that we could do to show off who we are. I think we did good. We didn't anticipate how slippery this would be, though. So, but luckily none of us fell. Thank you all for joining us today. I really was passionate about, and still am, I shouldn't have used the word was, nod to Lillian on selection of words. It is important to talk about technology right now, probably more than ever. As you've probably seen, there has been a huge movement right now with AI, integrations, all these keywords that you guys have heard about for so long, and it's important for us to have a discussion. I think a lot of people kind of shove this topic under the rug. They're like, oh, I don't want to know about it, because we're all in sort of overload, right? We've had a pandemic. For those of us that are a little bit older, we've had a lot of things we've been through. I think we mentioned September 11th. How about when the year was going from 1999 to 2000? Anybody remember that bubble? Yeah. A lot of data on that one. Well, we're living through another one of those times, right? And I don't think that this is going to go away. And if you know nothing about me, know at least this. I'm the type of person to tackle something head on. If I don't understand it, I'm going to do my darnest to understand it, to get uncomfortable. And as you're going to learn through my panel here, that is what I also push everybody else to do, is to get uncomfortable and get comfortable with being uncomfortable. It's to me, the only way to learn, to grow, and to keep moving. So enough about that. I have an amazing panel here that comes from a wealth of backgrounds, and I will let them sort of go through that as we answer some questions. So I have myself a bunch of questions to ask them, and feel free if anybody has anything that they want to ask them or add to the conversation. This is an open forum, right? That's the whole point of today. So I'm going to start, and I'm going to start right now with Naveed.
Uh-oh.
They don't know who's getting what questions. Naveed, what do you think the biggest challenge is today in the technological and digital space?
I think it's trust. There's been so much going on. A lot of companies are failing. A lot of companies are starting. The last 3 years has been crazy just from all perspectives of technology, right? So established companies on the stock market going crazy, new companies taking off, new companies not doing too well. And what's happened as a result is people don't view modern new technologies with the same level of trust that they might have before. And so I think that's one of our biggest challenges right now.
Is trust in that space.
Is trust, yeah.
How about any amount of overwhelm?
Oh, for sure. So one example that I like to give is if you think about your money, and how many apps that are trying to advertise that I'm the best app for your money, right? Use me for your personal finances. Budgeting, I'm the winner. There's so many of them, it's difficult to tell the difference, or difficult to tell even sometimes which one is better. And this creates incentives for not the most trustworthy things, right? So for instance, if there are 20 people in a room, the one that shouts the loudest usually is the one that's heard. And so you see this kind of behaviors in tech companies as well, where you start making promises that you might be able to keep in 3 years, but not right now. And that just continues to erode the trust, right? So you may win in the short term, but in the long term, everybody loses.
Very, very true. How many apps do you guys have on your phone? Yeah, right? Too many? Too many apps? Yeah, probably should audit them every now and then, right? Next one's for Shara. What do you think are the most critical changes we need to make right now to face the future with technology?
I'd say getting employees involved and having training. I was reading something the other day just about the Industrial Revolution, and what I thought was, this is like that with, artificial intelligence. It's disrupting the workforce already, but we haven't seen even the surface of what technology is going to be able to do. And so I'd say preparing the workforce to work alongside technology. There's a lot of fear, right? Is this going to take my job? It is going to change a lot of jobs. And so people have to change and evolve with it, similar to going from manual work, in the warehouse to machines doing some of the work. Now there's machine learning, right? And so we have to come alongside technology and have that training and intentional development.
Could not agree more. I used to get made fun of a lot because I had this 1926 adding machine. Has anybody seen what those look like? They're about as tall as me, and you literally type your numbers in there and you pull it down and it does the same job as a TI-85. But now we have smartphones that do it all. Anyway, I get it, right? And how did you get the people that use the adding machines from 1926 to adopt a calculator? I mean, this isn't the first time we're seeing some sort of change, but for some reason, it seems to be scary for a lot of people. So that will lead me into Kristen. What's the number one way that we can make a difference with people having this fear about technology?
I would say I had a fabulous CEO that I had the pleasure of working under at one point, and he always focused on the 5 C's, and one of those was curiosity. And so just constantly, I say this to different associates. I work in corporate retail for over 25 years. And just being curious, I think, especially when, no matter what the subject is, curiosity is huge. And the worst thing you want to be is complacent. And no matter what your business is, what you're doing in life, if it's personal relationships, anything, if you keep that curiosity and asking those questions and not allowing that fear that Naveed was talking about hold you back, I think that's where I've really seen, from an adaptation standpoint, at least in my corporate experience, there's so many times new programs or new things came along and there's this need to hold on to, but this is how we've always done it. Versus kind of like Lillian was saying, flip that script of how's this for me? How can I use this and apply this in a different way? And just being curious about it versus being confrontational. It also goes back to reaction versus response. Reaction is the knee-jerk, this is how I've always done it, versus responding of how can I use this to my advantage and really showcase yourself as a leader in whatever you're doing.
I want to add to that really quick too, just piggybacking off of you, also leadership. In addition to employees being curious and leaders being curious, there needs to be a vision, right? So sometimes new technology comes out, there's new initiatives, and no one is setting the stage for here's where we're going to be in a year, here's the value, and here's how you tie into this technology so people feel as if it's happening to them and not with them. And you want to have people embrace it and be a part of the vision so they can feel like they have a part of it.
Mm-hmm. And even I just know from experience, tactical examples, when you're setting up new programs and processes, oftentimes at corporate, you've got these leaders at the top making all the decisions. They haven't done the job for years, sometimes decades. They have no idea how it's done. So engaging associates at all levels that are going to be touching it from the beginning, getting their engagement and their involvement in understanding it and building it with you gives them autonomy in the process, and then they're going to help socialize. They're really going to invigorate the culture within your organization because you're not trying to sell it to them. They're already bought in because they were part of that process.
And you actually save money doing that, because if you don't engage the people actually doing the work, you could add 15 extra steps to somebody's job.
Absolutely.
And you're thinking it's going to be easier for them, and now they refuse to do it. So you have to go back, relearn, redo, retrain, reconfigure, and probably spend more money on the application than you would have if you would have upfront said, hey, let's do this together.
Yep.
What are the steps for your job? So
Well, and it goes back to trust.
Yeah.
Now you've lost the trust of your associates.
And I'll add a couple of things to that if it's okay.
Please.
First is there's this thing that we've always heard that nobody ever gets fired for hiring IBM. Harvard just did a study and found that anybody who hired IBM should have been fired because of all the efficiency that they lost by not turning to the new thing. And I think second to what you said here, you're seeing a really great trend now from the technology side where the company or the people who are selling into the companies are starting with the end user, right? So they say, hey, Dahlia, why don't you try using this new messaging app? You might like it. And then bring your friends. And then eventually you get to the people who are making the decisions who might not have used the messaging or they don't see it on a day-to-day. Who wants to Slack the CEO, right? So there is really good momentum, I think, from the market. You're absolutely right, though, that the people who are buying it do need to do some work to catch up.
It's true. And then even the people here's where we're at, right, in the digital era. Even the people, by the time they buy it, by the time they develop it, by the time they train it, by the time they get the culture buy-in, it's changed.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a
Moving
new
so
app
fast.
that's out there, or there's a new website that's out there, and it changes as you blink. So how do you stay? This one's going to Catherine. I do this on purpose to her because I've literally started working with her in a product that my company utilizes, and throughout its time, it has changed. And I've joked, I've made the mistake of leaving her. I had to learn the hard way. I called her, went crawling back. They do it best. But this isn't about her company. It's about the fact that it changes. How do you stay on top of that? With communication and sales.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm just a born on-the-go learner. And I view the world of technology as literally having evolved around me. You know, my first job out of college, I was selling print advertising. And then that company, went digital. And so I had to move people from print advertising to digital advertising. And, now I work in a tech space, and it's very forward-thinking for the multifamily industry that I'm in that's very behind. And there's a lot of noise. So I find I stay educated with everybody I talk to all day. What are you hearing? What do you know? What do you think? And there's a lot of confusion. I think that leads to the fear, too. So I feel like it's kind of my purpose to calm the noise. Maybe my product will help them, maybe it won't, but I can at least educate and help them move forward in a better way.
Very, very true.
I want to add to that, too, just creating a culture of change, right? Because if things are constantly changing and you think that it's going to change once, now you stop and you start making your placemat and everything, and it's like, oh, I have to move again. And so having a culture of change, and I think you mentioned curiosity earlier, and also a culture where it's okay to try new things and it's okay to make a mistake, or to, like what Lillian said, there's always two sides, and it's okay if you do something that you think is stupid, right? We all do, and ask questions. So there is never a stupid question. There's been times as I was learning in my career, and I'm still learning, where I may be the only person who will ask the question, and somebody says, well, you don't know that? No, that's why I ask, right? So I'm gonna ask because I want to know, and so don't be afraid to ask those questions so that you can get what you need.
So to tag on to what Cher said, how many people in this room have been in a meeting or a conference or something where somebody's talking about something and you don't know what they're talking about, but you don't have the courage to ask, but then somebody else asked it, and then you see half the room, raise your hand if you've been in that circumstance where all of a sudden you're like, okay, yeah, I didn't know that either.
Yeah.
Someone has to ask the question. So one of the other C's that my CEO talked about was courage. Show the courage, do the things. Don't be afraid we're so terrified as humans of failing. You're not. There is no failure. It's just a learning opportunity. So don't approach things from that standpoint, from that mindset or perspective, as Lillian was talking about, and ask those questions. I've been in so many rooms with leaders. I am the smallest fish in this big old pond, and I'm constantly asking questions. And then You watch the body language and the dynamics of the room, you know, like, oh yeah, I know what this is. I'm like, what is that? I don't understand. And then all of a sudden, I see peers who I thought knew it all asking, well, wait, you mean? And then you can tell they didn't know either. And then you have a much more robust conversation, and you actually are solution oriented because you're not afraid to ask those questions.
My favorite are always the acronyms. Every company has acronyms.
Yes. Yeah.
And they think that you know what the heck they're talking about. I'm like, what does that stand for? Now we all know what bitch stands
Yeah.
for. So we are all good now. I think we're good.
The amount of people at my company that have come to me after years and been like, what is CTAM? And I'm like, hold on, I got to think of it. I mean,
Yeah.
And it's thrown around all the time.
Thrown
Things
around.
like that happen.
Yep. So let's talk about terms that are thrown around a lot. Shara, what have you heard in this tech space that you think term-wise is thrown out a lot, that is misunderstood, and definitely holds multiple meanings?
I would say even the term digital transformation holds so many different meanings, because if you talk to people that are technology oriented, their view is, yes, it is the technology transforming, the machine learning, and all of the pieces behind the scene. If you talk to someone who is not versed in the technology space, to them it is learning. And one of the misconceptions that I see is that technology is to solve all the problems, right? And truly, it is not going to solve all the problems, because it can't replace the human interaction that is necessary. And so it's important that as we hear these terms, that we communicate together, right? So that each person is on the same page, so we can collaborate to get the result that we want.
Yep. Couldn't agree more. Naveed, do you have any terms you hear?
So when I hear things like digital transformation, my eyes glaze over. And in my head, I'm outside playing in the garden.
Yeah.
Because these things, they mean nothing, right? Like, what does digital transformation mean? And everybody in the room will have a different definition. You haven't decided what you're actually trying to do, and instead you're trying to label things without understanding them. And I think that causes so many issues, because communication is really a core part of technology, right? Like, I think a lot of people look at technology as a crutch, when really it's an enabler, right? Like, we use technology to be better as human beings. Lillian has refused to adapt to the phone with her diary, but sometimes like she finds she's more effective in that way, and we should be honest with ourselves about the thing that we're using making us more effective. So that's why I love this example, right? Like on the phone, Lillian doesn't find herself as effective with the notes. Writing in her diary, she does, and we do these things that you don't have to use technology if it's not enabling you, and it's a choice, right? So I think there's a lot of communication that digital transformation.
And judging.
And
right?
judging, yeah.
People will judge. They'll be like, well, why don't you use this? I use this. Where have you experienced judgment? Throw this to either Kristen or Catherine.
Well, just being on this panel. I mean, it was originally like, be the best you. I'm like, oh my gosh, like I love personal growth. I'm a ferocious learner kind of situation. I'm like, speaking in front of audiences, like that's my jam. I love it. Then I get the email, it's information and technology. I'm like, what the hell did she sign me up for? I like work corporate retail. Like I'm the one trying to get my people to not lose their minds every time the system changes, and like I'm the camp counselor. Like what am I gonna do up here? But then that's where like my personal growth, I'm like, if I'm uncomfortable, I'm learning. So that panic, that dialogue that used to span, and I would, that the beautiful, lovely, welcoming, encouraging voice in your head, right? She's like, she or he is so nasty. Not letting that spiral and recognizing, okay, I feel uncomfortable, then I'm gonna grow. I'm gonna learn while I'm up here, but then also, just like, the question I asked earlier, I'm sure there's tons of you in the room that are like, I don't know about this stuff. I mean, I'm 46. I was an analog kid. This is a digital world. Like my first cell phone was in college. It was a Zach Morris, 4-inch wide, 8 inches long, extend the antenna, flip the voice thing. Some of you might not even know who Zach Morris is. If you didn't, in the early 90s, there was a TV show called Saved by the Bell.
Raise your hands. Who knows who Zach Morris is?
Okay, good.
There we go.
All right. So, that was my junior year of college. Like, there were not cell phones. And I look at my kids who have very rarely ever held a book. all of their learning is done on an iPad. So just understanding that context of how much has evolved in just my 46 years. You know, we walked into a condo one day for our vacation, and the kids are like bustling in, and all of a sudden they're frozen, staring at the wall. I'm like, what the hell is happening right now? They're looking at a wall-mounted phone that had a cord. And my, at the time, 5-year-old little man was like, Mama, what's that? And I'm like, oh my Lord. Like, that's a telephone, buddy. He's like, what? And you like push, like, their buttons sticking out. Like, and so just that evolution, you know, and I guess the whole, I'm getting off on a tyrant, but like the whole judgment piece. Then when people are asking, what are you doing this week? And I said, oh, I'm speaking on this panel for information and technology. It was, why? Why are you doing that? Like, you're the one asking your 17-year-old senior in high school, like, how do I do this again? And she's helping me on my phone. But that's what we're gonna learn. Like, having that, going back to the courage piece of it, like, we can allow ourselves to judge ourselves all day, every day. I say this all the time to my kids, my coworkers. Other people's opinions of you are none of your business. Who cares what somebody else in this room thinks? Because you're going to be learning, you're going to be growing, you're becoming a better you.
And the truth is, nobody really thinks about you. Like,
No,
that's the biggest
they're
part.
so in their head. Right now, Naveed, all Naveed cares about is Naveed. He doesn't care what I'm saying.
It was an eye-opening moment for me about 5 years ago because I just was someone that would get so worried about what people thought. And it hit me like a lightning bolt that everybody is thinking about themselves and no one is really thinking about you. And it's very freeing. To your point about like speaking the question, I mean, I've just really leaned into my intuition when I'm in a conversation and I hear the question, I say the question, and I think part of growing and learning and evolving as an adult is figuring out the things that you know that you almost take for granted that you think are just, who doesn't know that? And sometimes those are your special sauce.
True, and now you've got the younger generations, right? Like to Kristen's point earlier, they're the ones who have never held a Zach Morris phone. They're the ones that have never known a life of going to school and not having a Chromebook or an iPad. How many of you have kids in school right now? Yeah, what are lockers for? Just, yeah,
Their
go
jacket.
ahead. To decorate, right? To look at yourself in the mirror. You have your little posters or whatever. You don't even do posters anymore. But that's the point, right? Times have changed so much and so rapidly that it's tough for every generation to understand the other generation. This goes to our older generations. I was speaking with Shara about this earlier. She has a team member that she's been working with on this. Do you want to talk about how it was to coach her?
Yeah, so in the previous role that I had, just with technology, there's people who have been in a role for, let's just say, 25, 30 years, and they are used to doing things the same exact way, right? And so when you are leading a new team and now you are coming in with new ideas, new innovation, new technology, it's important to consider their role, right? Like, so not just the individual who is adapting to the change well and they are like, oh yes, and maybe they are newer, fresh out of college, and they're used to using the Chromebook and they're used to doing that, but there's also value I found in collecting ideas from those who may have a little resistance. And a lot of times in an environment, sometimes as leaders, we can say, well, this person's resisting, they're against technology, but really, they may give you some really keen insights about things to watch out for. And I'll give one example. I was working with an organization, I'm a change management consultant, and there was an individual who was saying, hey, I don't think we want to send out these messages to clients. Well, their clients were unionized employees. So new leader comes in, they want to use a new tool, they want to survey these unionized employees, not realizing that I don't know if you're familiar with, are you familiar with union workers? Like, they get paid for every second that they are on the clock. Even if they're off the clock, if you call them, then you need to pay their hourly rate. And so the leader decides, I'm just going to do it anyway because this is a new idea and I need to collect my data and all this. And there was backlash because the clients ended up being charged, right? Because the employees filed what they called a grievance to say, you sent me messages on my off hours. And that's an example, right, of listening to both sides and recognizing that sometimes people aren't being resistant. Sometimes they have information that you need to tie into the new technology.
To tag on to that, Shara, going back to communication, like wherever you guys work, do you have truly transparent two-way communication? Because that's huge. And whether you're talking technology, you're talking anything in your business, are you truly at any level of the organization welcome to have a voice at the table? And not just a voice, but is it received? Is it acknowledged? And if you are a business owner, are you creating that? Are you modeling that? Are you, when people speak up, pausing and making sure it's acknowledged and recognizing it? Like, how can you be a thought leader in whatever respective area you're working in?
Exactly. That's very good.
Yeah, I think, and thank you so much to Lillian, because we keep pulling from the session earlier, is at the root of every confrontation is a miscommunication or a misunderstanding. And I think a lot of what we're describing here is exactly that. Or the consequences of committing to something regardless, right? Like this unionized situation, it seems like it's just a setup that's built for disaster regardless. Right? Nobody's going to be happy. Somebody's going to get paid, but that's not, like, you know, it's just not, nobody's going to feel good about it. So I think, like, you're absolutely right. It's about communication. And I think it's also be important to be transparent about like what that means, right? Like so I'm a CEO, and we take communication very seriously, but I also need shit to get done. Right? And like that's just a fact. Like we're here to make money, and we make money by helping other people find value. And if we're not doing that, then this is not the place for that. And so it's important to communicate exactly what the objective and outcomes are, and how we can be our best selves, and how we can bring ourselves to work in that framework.
Very, very good point. Communication is great as long as everyone's voice is being heard, but then it's also just not a straight up, session of just haggling each other, right? I don't want to keep cussing, but if you know me, I'm a cusser, so I'm not going to do that. But you know what I'm trying to say. As long as the communication is productive and not just so that you have an area where you're just venting, because that's not really productive. You're not getting anywhere. So it's important to use your words wisely. Speaking, kind of shifting a little bit, I want to know, actually from each of you, what you think, what's your take on the role technology should play. And I don't want to leave out, we can't have a whole discussion about technology and leave out the social media world. Before I get to ask them that question, I just want to see a raise of hands. How many of you use X? How many of you know what X is? Okay.
Nope.
Right, I see some confused looks. How many of you have used Twitter? It is now X. How many of you decided that Twitter was going really downhill, didn't want to do X, so you got Threads? I know, I was with you, though. I was with you all the way. She raised her hand before the question was done. It's going downhill. Right. How many have a Threads account? How many of you know who owns Threads? Okay. So I'm getting there, don't worry. How many of you know what Facebook is? Instagram, Meta, back to Threads, same company. Meta owns, obviously, Facebook, and they also created Threads. So if you think that you're being trendy by getting off of Twitter because it went to X and now you got Threads, you're still with Facebook. My whole point is you cannot have a conversation about technology and not talk about social media and its prevalence in our culture. And it will play a role in how you understand how technology fits in your life, in your world. I know I left out TikTok.
Yeah,
It's
who
my-
uses TikTok?
I'm not even gonna lie to you. I use a lot of TikTok. Anybody? Actually, no, I love that. Raise hands. TikTok, anybody? Okay. How many of you got afraid that TikTok was gonna get taken away, so you downloaded a VPN that made it look like you were just me and Naveed? Okay. Love it. So there you go. There's a little bit of insight into your tech panel. So nerd alert, here we go.
So I wrote Congresswoman Beatty actually yesterday, and I
Did
said,
you?
please don't ban TikTok because
Yep.
I need it.
Tell you what, even if they do,
Yeah.
we got our VPNs. What's interesting about the VPN, I want to know if you found this too, and then I'm going to ask you guys the question, I swear. Did you start getting ads in Swedish?
I did, yeah. So we're using Nord, both of us, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll change your ads. Be careful if you go that route. Just make sure you know the language. Yeah. Okay. Actually,
yay,
that's a great
Yeah.
one. But we'll start with that question. Would you like to take this one?
VPN stands for Virtual Private Network, and how I understand it is that it lets you communicate on networks where you're not allowed to communicate. So for instance, if you are in Tanzania, like my parents, and I have a Netflix account in the US, and they can access my Netflix account here, I can set them up with a VPN so it looks like they're here.
Yeah. So we're using VPNs that look like we're in the Netherlands,
That's right.
so that we can use TikTok in case they ban it. So it's just a redirect, and it's a much more difficult way of
Yeah.
finding.
And none of that is true, by the way. None of us have done that.
He's going to deny encounter cues if any of you bring it up.
Just an example. Stop
Yeah,
recording.
actually, I probably should have made that so public.
Certainly not now.
Everything we
No,
said
the
was
stakes are
just a
rules.
scenario.
You have to say, scratch that from the record.
Scratch it from the
Scratch it
record.
from the
Didn't
record.
really
Yes,
happen.
yeah.
So, speaking of, what role does tech play in each of your lives, both at work and personally? We'll start with you, Shara.
I tried to look this way so you could.
I know what you were doing.
Don't ask me.
That
first.
is the worst thing you can do with Dahlia. She's like, boom.
Yeah, I kind of hone in on
So
that.
I use technology a lot for personal, business life. One of the things that I use it for is to help manage tasks and help me to be more efficient. But there are times when you can use technology to be efficient, and then you find yourself using technology all the time. And so I have a 4-year-old, and probably about 2 years ago, I was, working, and he came to me and said, "Mommy, get off the computer." And what I heard him say is, "Mommy, you're always on the computer." And so I recognized at that moment that there needs to be a line between when I'm using technology for, even if it's for personal use, because I may get on the computer on my tablet to research something or look up something or look at a video, but I recognize that there needs to be some sort of divide there also to teach him, because one of the I have nieces, nephews, and I only have one child. A lot of my nieces, they don't know how to socialize with human beings. And so they are conditioned to use the devices. And so for me, I use it to be efficient in my work, in my personal life, but I also have learned to separate that and have time. Like even with my son, he knows now, he says, "Mommy, no devices, no family time," So he's trained now to recognize that there is a time for technology. And it goes back to what we said earlier. Technology is not a replacement for communication and collaboration with humans.
Very well said. Catherine?
You can clap for me.
Yeah, go ahead. Wait.
Okay, now we can move on. Thank you.
I plead the fifth. I would not
She
like to.
pleads the fifth.
No, I'm in an interesting role because I sell a software. It's a leasing software for people that are leasing apartments. And I sell it to the marketing brains of the world, like Dahlia, and then the people that use it are people at leasing offices. And so all day I'm sort of met with this fear about this is gonna take my job. You're just here to take my job. And I say over and over and over again, the idea with technology is if we do it right, you can automate things that are not the things that humans like. You can do it so that you can make things happen at a far faster speed than a human would ever be able to. But at a certain point, humans want humans. And the human part of all of us will become way more important because almost everything else can be automated. I mean, I like to think of myself as a great writer. That skill is completely irrelevant anymore. I have to translate it. I mean, it's not irrelevant, but it kind of is. You can plug into ChatGPT whatever you want to be written for you, and there it is in the style of whatever it is.
So finding that human element is becoming more and more important, and I think technology enables us to be quicker and faster and more efficient in things that we don't enjoy. And then I'm a big fan in my personal life of TikTok.
Yeah.
She puts me to bed every night, and she knows me so well. And I think that the thing that is so fascinating about the social media era, so I'm kind of going into your next question a little bit, is there's no central point of truth anymore. Everybody's opinion is very out in the world for everybody, so it becomes even more important for you to find your own.
Yeah, recenter yourself.
Can I say something real quick on
Please,
that,
yeah.
just on the social media? So I recently deleted the Facebook app off of my phone because I was using it to, of course, I'm a speaker, consultant, so I'm like, oh, you're supposed to build a brand, you need to post, and so I'm posting on there, and I'm posting on LinkedIn, and in the midst of doing all that, you can't help but scroll past things that you don't want to see, right? That maybe someone's sharing an opinion or they're sharing bad news, and before you know it, you start to feel like, oh my, this is happening, that's happening. And I noticed that spiral in my mind, and I was like, it's preventing me from being productive on the things that are most important. So I need to delete this. It's doing more harm than good for me. So I do want to say, like, even though we are in this social media and digital age, it is okay to unplug at times, especially we talking about being your best self and your mental, physical well-being. It affects your spirit, your mind, your family, all of that if it's consuming your time. And I read something that recently that said that the average person spending 3.5 hours a day on social media, and it's double for millennials, right? So that means a whole work shift on social media. So what could you do with an extra 40 hours a week? Picking up the phone, I think 2,617 times a day, right? So like,
So that stat, it equals 3 months of your year. And then
Yeah.
you multiply that out, that's 16 years of your life, the average life of a human, if it's, I believe, 82 years old. Like 16 years of your life.
and then
Like, put it in
people
that
say,
context.
I don't have time
Time.
to chase my dreams,
Correct.
right? We all have the same amount of time, but it's like currency. How are you spending it? I think if we evaluate our days, because we're still talking about be our best self with technology, and we say, where do I spend hours? What could I do with an extra 3.5 hours a day? Maybe I could write that book I say I wanted. Maybe I could go and start my business. Maybe I could spend more time with family. Maybe you can spend time on a dating app and find a special someone. You know, whatever it is that you want to do, right, there's time for that if we evaluate kind of where we're spending it.
Exactly. And as Lillian said, would you sign your name at the end of that day if you spent all that time just scrolling? Listen, Linda, some days you need that. Some days you need it to get by. There are some hard days, but the idea is when you start to look at it with these stats, that is astounding. And there are better things you can do with your time.
Isn't it ironic that the whole point of social media is to connect everybody, but it connects in just this different way that's a little bit more shallow and less.
I will say, though, I think Naveed and I might have a little different of a take because a lot of our families don't live here and they're oceans away.
Yeah.
And social media has allowed us to remain
Yeah.
connected to our families. But what's interesting is I've noticed my more American counterparts have a very different feed and a very
Yeah.
different look on social media. Do you notice the same?
Yep.
I think our foreignness really comes out when you look at it. What's your take on that?
So we could probably speak. Can we go for an hour maybe? So there's a couple of things. One is that there's a book I read that changed my life when I was about 12 or 13 years old. It's called Tools for Thought. It's written by a professor who worked as a mathematician at MIT. And it's a history of technology, right? So from way back in the day to the modern computer. And at every instance, he's analyzing, like, why did this get automated? Why did this become even more automated? What was the reason? And at every stage, you find that it's an enabler, right? It's a tool that makes somebody better. It makes us better as human beings. And I think, I highly recommend you read the book, first of all. And I think we should always look at it from that perspective, is that technology is an enabler. And we also have to be open, right? I think a lot of the things that I hear about social media really are rooted in fear. I am not feeling as connected as my social media tells me I should be. Well, you are, right? Like you are. You're both of those things, like Lillian said. I love you. So there is if you look at the evolution of communication, right, like how we speak with each other, how we think about one another, how we present ourselves, the more that has changed, right? The more accessible we are to other people, you can see the differences how we present ourselves. And that's not a bad thing, right? Like, that's just what it is. Somebody had mentioned the industrial revolution, and I fully agree. I think we are at that cusp, right? Like, where AI is going to change everything. It already is. How many of you have used ChatGPT, first of all? Did you know that in French, ChatGPT sounds like cat I farted?
I did know that. ChatGPT.
Yeah, there we go. Fun fact.
Just imagine the French news on that one.
Yeah, right? Like cat I farted is getting used for writing blogs. You know? The reason I bring that up is that if you've used it, you understand how easy it is to use and how actually powerful it is. And it's not going to take your job, it's going to make you better at it, right?
Better.
So I think we are now the old ones, and the new generation is figuring out how they communicate, how they speak, and how they evolve. I think if people are spending 16 hours a day on their phones, they're connecting with other people. That's 100% for sure. They know more about each other's lives than we see, from outside. However, the one thing that worries me is that we can't be human without touch. Right? Physical contact is extremely important for us as human beings. And so when I think about my son, I'm like, how do I get him to touch more people? Like,
In a non-creepy way.
In a non-creepy way, yeah.
stop recording.
Yeah.
So that's something I haven't figured out yet, but we'll.
So I have two kind of
Go ahead.
challenges for that.
Yeah.
Is one, I feel a lot of social media is a highlight reel of what you think people want to see or what you want people to perceive of you, and it's not necessarily reality. So I would say that is one kind of challenge for the younger generations. And then two, as much as they are absolutely, like I've got a senior in high school, she's 17, and I was that parent, call it 3-4 years ago, where all the kids gathered at our house constantly, like it's like a train station there. And they're all sitting on the couch, and all of a sudden you can see they're flipping, texting each other or messaging each other, and then they all start laughing because they're looking at the same stuff. I was like, I did the old, get the basket out, let me collect your cell phones, talk to each other. And they were so uncomfortable. So as much as they're connected with visually what other people are putting out there, I feel this generation is very isolated. And I feel like that's where you're seeing the exponential level of anxiety happening with this generation, is because there isn't that human contact interaction. Like, what is marriage gonna look like in 10, 15 years? Because I'm telling y'all, these kids don't know how to talk.
How many
Like,
of
they
you,
Snapchat each other to learn
Yeah.
how, to start dating. Like, I'm fascinated by, like, how is my daughter gonna date?
Have you ever
Because she
sat on
can't
the
have a conversation. She freaks the hell out.
but have you done this at home where you sit on the couch, hold hands with your partner, and look at Instagram?
Yeah.
I think that's wonderful.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's a
The
great
marriage
way
of both worlds.
Yeah.
You got the touch going. And
Touching technology, the T and the T, I like it.
So if you get all the kids to hold hands, well,
Right,
yeah,
right.
Who knows?
it's true. You have a generation of people, these kids, that's what they're doing. They're so engaged with their technology. But I want you all to sort of understand that is who is coming into the workforce.
Correct.
That is who is coming into your communities. And they're the ones that are going to take the jobs. They're the ones that are going to be your neighbors. Think of your neighbors now. Yeah, imagine them then. They can't talk now, they won't talk then. Like, that's where we're going.
That's an important thing for us to consider too. Like, that's what I was going to say, is the level of anxiety
Yes.
that the young people feel these days. A lot of it, if you have the ability to block out any thought, and if you don't want to see the glass half full or half empty, and you choose, like, I want to block out anybody that says the glass is half empty because it's not a good vibe for me. So the first time you have a conflict, or the first time you get a performance review at work, or the first time you get feedback that is unlike what you believe you should get, now you have a crisis and a meltdown because you've never had to deal with it. And while you can block online, you can't block in real life.
Yeah.
True, and that, yeah, that's true. Did anybody see the stat how bullying goes beyond now. At least when we were growing up, bullying just happened at school, right? And I'm not saying that's great, but at least you could leave and go home and be safe. Now it follows you. Now you see the phones pinging, and even if you turn your phone off, your mom or dad or your sibling, their phones are pinging. You're hearing about it nonstop, relentlessly. So it's just there is a negative side. I'm not trying to say that technology is all rainbows and bubbles and unicorns and smiling animals. We'd like to think it is, though. As Lillian mentioned, your world is what you make it.
Well,
it is
and
all about perception.
A challenge, should you choose to accept it, is be truly authentic.
Yeah.
Like I'm only on Instagram, but when I post the good days and the bad days. And I'll give you an example. My son has some behavioral health challenges. He has blind rage. So I guess the best analogy I could give is all of us have a volcano, if you want a visual. And our lava line tends to be real low. So that distance to exploding, it takes some time for the average person. My son's lava line is very high. So that distance to him losing it and literally being non-communicative, raging, he's literally seeing red, is something that we've had to manage as a family. There was a point I had to this. What was your question? I totally lost my train of thought. Thank you. So, thank you very much. So
I was just
one
so
day
wrapped in the
he
story.
was
Yeah, me
having
too. I was like, what happened?
horrible. Yeah, like there was a point to this.
Where did the
Like,
lava go?
Where's the lava? What happened?
Right. So he was having a tough day, and he was having a really bad blind rage morning, and it went on in literally 3 hours of screaming, raging, kicking, throwing things. It can demoralize you. And so one of the techniques we've learned through therapy is we have to remove him from the environment, and I take him to a park, and we go walking. You get in nature. You get out fresh air. You reconnect, like get grounded, all of that kind of stuff. Well, I take a picture of us first driving 270 because we had to calm the heck down. Both of us. I'm sobbing, he's sobbing. So I took a picture of 270 sign at one point. I took a picture, I was driving, so hopefully don't turn me in. And then we go to the park, we get regrounded, we come back, and I post about we had a really tough morning, and sometimes you just have to go for a drive, and emotions are energy in motion, and you just need to let it out. And posted this. I can't even tell you, and I could care less how many likes, how many whatever I get. I do it to share pictures of kids and experiences. I'm all about moments. The amount of feedback I got from peers, coworkers, people that are friends of a friend of a friend that are on my private account that said, thank you for being real. I struggle with this. And the amount of conversations it started by being authentic and not just sharing the pretty parts, but share the ugly parts too. Share the not so good moments, because that's reality. It's neutral, right? It's the good and the bad kind of situation. I feel too many of us are victim of only sharing the highlight reel.
Very true. Everybody's got their highlight reel, but we all got a low light reel. I want to make sure that we have any questions that you guys have answered. Katie gave me the nod, and so I want to make sure that you've got such a wealth of knowledge up here. I want to make sure if you guys have anything you want to talk about, anything you've heard today that you're like, ooh, what the heck is that? Anybody? Bueller?
There's one.
Oh, we got a taker.
We got one.
What happened?
I'm curious to hear your insights on. Hello? Does that work? Okay. I'm curious to hear your insights on, if you're an organization, how do you recommend the vetting process for selecting technology? Where do you start?
Ooh, excellent question.
I can
Go ahead,
start.
Cher.
Yeah. I'd say always start with the requirements, right? So what is the outcome that you want? And that will help you determine what features you need. And so as you're selecting a product, you can actually do a feature list and do a comparison. Here's the outcome that I want. Here are the features that I need. And then go down the list, and then whichever tool fits that the most within your budget and with what you need, I think choose that. There are a lot of times, working with companies where I see they'll try to choose the most cost-effective option, and that's not always the best, because if you purchase a Band-Aid and you need surgery, right, then you're going to be back for a lot of Band-Aids, and you're going to waste a lot of money.
Very true.
I'd say try it, see if it does what it says it does. And if you can't try it easily, then don't buy it.
Yeah, I personally, if it helps at all, I only do trials with a very small contract, like maybe 2-3 months. You get that amount of time because you don't have enough time to mess up. And make sure you're solving an actual problem. A lot of these tech companies will tell you you have a problem that you don't actually have, but it solves it. You didn't have that problem to begin with. So just make sure you understand what you're like. You probably experienced that, huh? They're like, you have a problem with followers. No, you don't. You weren't even looking for that. So it's just make sure you understand what you're trying to solve. Good question. Great answers. Anybody else?
And maybe doing a pilot also, right? Like
We
so,
have one right there.
piloting the product.
Yeah, pilot the product, exactly. There we go.
Thank you. So I just had a question for you this morning. A lot of times when we think about innovation, we can't leave diversity out of the conversation, specifically diversity of thought, right? And so I think at times when we leave space for diversity of thought generationally, we see that there are more opportunities where we might have missed something, right? So I think sometimes there are some negative connotations about the change and the shift in culture when we come together generationally in what each of us bring to the table. How are you all as thought leaders and innovators welcoming the next generation amongst your strategy and leadership growth?
Excellent question.
I'll start that. I am at a really interesting point in my career because I'm in my mid-40s and I feel very compelled to start giving what I've learned to others that come behind me. Hopefully, maybe they're hard-headed like me and they won't learn quickly, or learn from my advice, but at least I'm trying to take that wisdom and fuel it to the generation behind us. I think there are a lot of beautiful young people that I work with that inspire me for what's to come. I have an absurd amount of nieces and nephews. I have 17. And I was with them all for the last couple of days on vacation, and I just got the biggest kick out of it because one's in high school, one of them is in high school and two are in college, and one's just out of college and they haven't even worked a real job yet. And they're sitting around being like, yeah, I think I'm just definitely gonna do hybrid. I think that's going to be the way that I like to do it. And I'm like, you don't know anything about anything. And driving here today in real clothes, I work remote, I was like, oh yeah, I'm sure you're going to love that. But, they'll figure it out just like we all did. And there's tons of options, and I think we don't have to be limited by the way that we've always done things. COVID really changed. We talked about that a lot. Like, for all of the horribleness, it also inspired a whole new way of doing things. And so I just believe in pouring in to the people that come
And
down.
I'll share something too. So as a change management consultant, I help organizations that are implementing new software, restructuring, or implementing any change that impacts humans. Of course, it spans across generations. And something that I've found to be critical is really helping to understand people's key drivers. So to your point about diversity and thought, we all have a primary bend towards one of 4 buckets. Usually you're a person that's like employee engagement, and you're the person that wants to sing Kumbaya, and you want to make sure everybody has a sticker or a name tag and all of that. You may be a person that is innovative, right? So you're always coming up with new ideas. You may be a person who's processed, that everything has to be done the same way, right? We want our accountants to be process-driven, right? And then fourthly, a results-driven person. So a person who, no matter what, they're getting results. And so you need to have people in all 4 of those buckets. And the key is to help people understand that you're not against each other. So the innovator is not against the process person. You have to work together. So if you come up with a new idea, that idea still needs a process. And so when you talk about it from that perspective, and each person understands who they are, what they bring to the table, and we keep talking about what Lillian said earlier, right? If we all understand who we are and we accept it, and we also accept that Naveed is the way that he is, or like so on and so forth, then I'm open to hear your perspective, because like for me, I am a results person who is innovative. And so there's times where I want to skip process. I have my assistant who's here. She knows this, like she's process, and she holds me accountable. And sometimes we are at odds like this, because I'm like, who cares? It's not that big of a deal. But it is. There are things that are a big deal, right? And so if we can be receptive and not get offended by everything in the events, response, outcomes, is that what you said?
E+R equals
yeah,
R.
so the event that happens, it just is. And what they say is, and if you could filter it through your perception and say, what does this mean? Am I looking at it just from my perspective, or can I see the other side? And that way, all the generations can get along and learn from each other.
Yeah, said another way, like great leaders aren't the smartest person in the room. They hire the experts in each area, and they're not threatened by it. You know what I mean? Yeah. So also, like another perspective of that is you've got, as far as your 4 quadrants, how do I use, okay, so-and-so is the best at this and so-and-so is the best at this, so how do I get my ideas sold if they're really good at this versus that combativeness and that whole, we're all one team. And I've had those conversations with different leaders in my organization, like literally set them down and say, okay, buddy, we're on the same team. Like, what is going on here? And then you can get to the crux of they're feeling threatened because that individual likes to be the smartest person in the room, the loudest voice, likes to hear themselves talk. Okay, so how do I get him to play in the same sandbox with me, and how do we get the best results? Because I'm very much a results person too.
Well, and that's important. What's more important, how you feel or getting the result? And I worked with a peer many years ago who was the same way, who, well, he was late. He didn't want to do the work, right? But I realized that it was my perception of him that he didn't want to do it. I was taking over and doing everything. And when I would bring ideas, he would shut them down, but it was because I didn't include him. But my perception was, you're not doing anything, but I'm taking over. And when I took a step back, I said, I want the result. So if I want the result, I need to collaborate and say, hey, here's what I'm thinking of doing. What are your thoughts there? Now, he was gonna be hands off and let me do it anyway. He just wanted to know that he had a voice and I was considering his department. And so it always comes back to us as individuals. Like, it's never anybody else. It's always you.
Yeah, and don't make judgments either. Just because we talk about the younger generation being tech savvy and knowing all the things, not all of them are made equal. They don't know all the same technologies. You might find some of the older individuals who coded this program back in that made the WWW, the World Wide Web. You're going to find some of those people that actually know more than some of the younger generations. It's very important when we're talking about diversity of thought is not to clump everybody that's a Gen Xer, that's it. That's their capability, and that's all they can understand, as well as millennials. Millennials, in my opinion, are one of the most misunderstood generations, me being the oldest of them all. And then, of course, your Gen Z and Gen Alphas. Like, just don't assume. No, don't make assumptions. Try to understand each individual for their own diversity of thought that they bring to the table. Whether they be older or younger doesn't make much of a difference. It's what are their capabilities.
Just to clarify, your question was about encouraging diversity of thought on your team or participating on a team that requires diversity of thought?
Yeah, I would accept both, but I think I was really looking to see the conversation go specifically in the space of how are you every day in your workspaces being inclusive in diversity of thought for the next generation?
I think modeling. What behaviors do you want? What results do you want? You model it. And no matter what level you're at, if you're saying you want people to communicate, yet you're the CEO and somebody brings an idea and you shut them down and try to, in essence, embarrass them, are you really modeling what you're asking for? No. And so you can only control yourself, and we've talked about this, so like whether it's down, across, or up, model what you want, that engagement. I've been in rooms where I was welcome to take notes, and conversations were happening, and I was watching 2 specific individuals bring up ideas, being disregarded, and then somebody else in the room said the same stinking thing, and they're getting these accolades. I shot my hand up and said, you're right, just an example, you're right, Naveed, that's exactly what Shara was trying to say earlier. Gave her the acknowledgement, the encouragement, and I wasn't even a participant in the meeting, but I modeled what should have happened in the first place. So don't say, I'm not this title, or I'm not this. You're the CEO of you. No matter what your title is, make your presence known and make that impact in whatever room you're in.
I think I'll give you an example of how we do it at Dollar. There are 2 things. One is I strongly believe that expectation is reality. So if I expect to have a confrontational discussion with this person that I'm about to meet, then it's going to be confrontational. If I expect that it's going to be fantastic, 9 out of 10 times it's going to be fantastic. So that's the first thing, is like when you go in, go with the right attitude from your perspective, because that's what you can control. Second is all of us write a working with me manual. And in that manual, we'll say, this is the best time to ask me questions. Don't ask me questions at this time. This is how I like feedback. This is how I give feedback. These are my moods. Because we have to embrace who we are. And so and those are available to everybody across the team. Doesn't matter if you're the youngest person on the team, the newest person on the team, or the CEO. Everybody has access to read each other's. And that gives you an understanding of the human being that you're speaking with. And it encourages then you to live your values. So after that come the values. The values are what? Always be learning. It's safe, speak up. Those are our two primary values. And so when you combine all of these three things, you create an environment where people are open to speaking up, because being wrong is okay. That's how we find being right.
Don't be afraid to say, oh, I was wrong. I've been with my teams in the past, like we were ideating ideas and this and that. I was the position of power in that particular circumstance. I made the decision, we went down that path, quickly realized it was wrong. I very candidly and purposely, intentionally said, I was wrong, you guys were right. What can we do to pivot quickly? And we course corrected. That whole, again, going back to the fear of failure, like not wanting to admit wrongness, you're just costing yourself. Your greatest commodity in this life is your time and or resources. So your money,
And
whatever.
trust.
Yes,
Trust, yeah.
exactly.
Trust with the team. Yeah.
So I just want to take this moment to thank everyone in the room for being so open to listening to, what are we, 5 nerds talk about technology. I truly appreciate that, and then your engagement. I encourage you, if you have questions that you didn't want to ask while we were up here, corner us as we're around. They all know I like to make them uncomfortable, so go ahead and corner us and ask us whatever questions that you have. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for being on this panel. You guys brought so much to the table, and I truly am appreciative of that. Thank you so much, and thank you, Al.
you.